I am going to talk to you now about how to mix your own chicken feeds and some of the benefits of mixing your own feeds. I feed my chickens whole grains, and there is a lot of benefit to that. If you think about it, if you had to eat dry cornmeal all day, or you had the option to eat corn on the cob, what would you prefer? When food is milled and dried up, you lose a lot of nutritional value, and the longer it is exposed to the air, the more nutritional value you lose. So if you have feed for a month, then by the end of the month, it has a lot less nutrition in it than it had at the beginning of the month. It certainly has a lot less than it had when they marked it on the bag because all of these things are ground together, milled up, mashed together, and then bagged. Then they sit on the shelf, they are transported, and then you fill your containers and start feeding it. By then, it is all dried up and powder. Half of what you throw in the chicken yard gets knocked out by the chickens into the ground. They are not eating most of what you are giving them, so you are losing out. With whole grains, they are really not losing anything, because if you throw some corn or some wheat in there and they scratch it and knock it around, it is still there. They are going to find it, take it off the ground, and eat it. Besides that, it is still full of the oils that contain many of the minerals, amino acids, omega-3s, and all of the things that they really do need to be healthy and produce great eggs in high quality and high quantity. You are getting a much better food in the whole grain than you would in the cracked or ground versions. Now, if you have chicks and you have to give them ground or cracked feed, you can grind it yourself so you won't lose nutrition because you feed it immediately. Grinding it yourself is always an option, but there are a couple of considerations you need to make and things you need to understand when you are mixing your own feed. You can't just give them anything because they have to maintain a certain level of protein, a certain level of calcium, and a certain level of calories to be able to produce. All of the rest is a balance of those aminos, omegas, vitamins, and minerals. The three things that you are going to want to watch the most, though, are going to be your protein, your calcium, and your calories. Most of your store-brand chicken food laying pellets for grown chickens that are laying eggs are going to be a 14 to 16% protein base. Now, that is actually the minimum of what you can get away with. That is not the optimum of what you need to produce a lot of eggs. If you give them more protein, they are going to produce more eggs, they are going to be better quality eggs, and they are going to be healthier chickens. Then there is the calcium level. Here is the thing about calcium. Not every chicken needs the same amount of calcium. It is actually not so great to depend on a food-based source of calcium because, for example, your hens need a lot of calcium because they are producing a lot of eggshells, but your roosters do not need that much calcium. A lot of calcium can destroy their kidneys and really make them sick. So it is better, in my opinion, to put something like oyster shell in there so that they can go and pick as they need. The rooster doesn't have to eat it if he doesn't need that much since it's not mixed in with their food. And if the hens need more, they can go and get as much as they need. Plus, the oyster shell kind of helps also in their gizzard with the breaking down of the whole grains. If you are feeding whole grains, you will need to give them some form of gravel or something that they can use in their gizzard to help break down these grains. Because remember, chickens have no teeth. And of course, like all living organisms, they also need a fair amount of trace minerals to help them function and be healthy and live well. These things are actually kind of low in the feed quality that you buy in store brand feeds. Now you can buy local feeds, and a lot of times they are mixed a little better, and they'll have a little bit higher protein and mineral quality, but they're still not going to be anywhere near what you can get. You can get so much better for so much cheaper if you mix your own. Let's talk about different grains and what they have to offer and how you are going to need to mix this. The first thing we are going to look at is protein. We are going to need a good protein source. Most of your grains, though they have some protein, are not that high in protein. Probably your wheats and your corn have a little bit of protein, but it is not going to be enough. So you are going to need to add something. Some people put fish meal. Of course, if you are doing things like going to the fish docks and getting fish parts, fish throwaway, or invasive fish, then you probably won't even need to do this. But if you are mixing your own feed, you are going to need to find a protein base. For me, I find that the easiest thing to do is use soybean meal. It can have anywhere from 50 to 60% protein. That is huge. Here at the local co-ops, I can get a 50-pound sack of soybean meal for $15. But that $15 sack is going to probably last me a half a year because I'm not going to put that much of it in. We don't need 60% protein. A chicken is going to optimally be at about 20%. As I said, 14 to 16% is what the standard is, but really they need more like 20%. 20 to 25% will give you the maximum production and health for these chickens. If you want to test me on this, you can go and get a growing mash that is about 20% protein, which is going to cost you at a big box store about $20, and give them some growing mash for a day or two and see if their egg production doesn't just boom. Now, you couldn't keep them on a growing mash because the growing mash doesn't have enough calcium in it, so then they won't have enough calcium and the egg production will drop off. See, this is the balance we have to keep. They eat high protein, but they also need to keep their calcium. The laying pellets have enough calcium but not really enough protein, and the growing mash has a great amount of protein but not enough calcium. So mixing it yourself, you can get your levels up, and I do that on the protein with soybean meal. For your calcium, we talked about the oyster shell. I give them free access to oyster shell as much as they want, whenever they want, and you really don't have to worry too much about adding calcium. Every chicken needs different levels. There will be some calcium in the grains and they will be getting some of that from their food source, but it won't be enough. For me, I think the best option is just to give them all the oyster shell they want so they can eat what they need and not what they don't. Another option for good quality calcium is to add the egg shells that you harvest back to their food source. But this is a little tricky because you have to be sure that you don't introduce it back in a way that they know they're eating eggshells. Because the last thing you want is to train your chickens to eat their own eggs. What a lot of people will do is they'll keep their eggshells as they use them. And then once they get a good bit of them, they'll put them in the oven for a little while and bake them for just 10-15 minutes just to change the smell and the taste of them. Then you'll put them in a coffee grinder, grind them into powder, and then sprinkle that powder back into your food. It gives you a great, high-quality calcium. You're giving it right back to them, but you have to do it in a way that they don't know they're eating eggs. A $20 coffee grinder works great for grinding those shells into powder. Baking them or boiling them for just a little while will help to remove the smell and the flavor that they might associate with eggs. Whole wheat has about 14% protein, which is actually pretty good for a grain, along with a good amount of vitamins, minerals, and amino acids. They're actually pretty good on their omegas also, so wheat is kind of balanced all the way around. It's a good food source that runs about $10 per 50-pound sack. Oats run you about 9% in protein, and they're a pretty good source of minerals, probably of your grains. They're one of the better ones for your mineral source, and they're high in fiber. So that's a good thing to add too. Corn, surprisingly enough, has very little nutritional value. It's mostly calories. Keep that in mind, as anyone who raises livestock can tell you that when you feed an animal corn and you butcher them, they're full of fat. You have to be careful with corn with your chickens because it will actually put so much weight on them that you'll end up with a bunch of fat bottom girls that can't lay their eggs because they just can't pass them. They will stop laying eggs if they eat too much corn. You have to be careful not to put too much, but especially through your winter months, they do need some corn because it's going to give them the calories and the energy they need to produce those eggs and to keep their body heat up. Chickens need to maintain a certain level of body heat to produce eggs. Corn is good for calories, has a lot of sugar, and has about 10% protein. Flaxseed is great to add if you can get it. It is 25% protein and has a lot of minerals. It's really healthy, but getting it in large quantities is not as easy as soy meal. If you feel they are lacking minerals, you can get blackstrap molasses by the 5-gallon bucket for very cheap, and add that, as it is loaded with minerals. Another good option to mix in is calf manna. Calf manna is a feed full of protein, minerals, and calcium. I think it's like 25% protein. You can mix some of that in to give a boost in nutrients. It's made for baby calves to support growth, but you can mix it with your store brand feed. It can be a little expensive, maybe $35 a sack, so you're not really saving money, but it helps boost egg production. I'm mixing some in because I have some leftover that needs to be used. It is an extra source of boost if your laying is down or they are molting. Now I'm going to give you the cost breakdown of what these feeds cost me per pound and per 50-pound sack once they're mixed. A 50-pound sack of soy costs $15, which comes to 30 cents a pound, but I'm only going to use 103 per mixing. If I use a whole sack of wheat, a whole sack of corn, and a whole sack of oats at 50 pounds each, I'm only going to use 1 3 of a sack of the soy. The wheat cost me $10 for a 50-pound sack, 20 cents per pound. The oats cost me $10, 20 cents per pound. And the corn costs $6 and 12 cents per pound. If I'm doing 1 part wheat, 1 part corn, 1 part oats, and 1 part soy, that comes out to $11.50 per 50 pounds, which is 23 cents a pound. That's not bad. Basically, what I'm creating there is a 30 to 35% protein mix, which is actually more than you need. You could even cut back more and drop your price to about $9 per $50. Keep in mind that store-bought laying pellets are only 14 to 16% protein, and you're paying $15 a sack. The best you can get is maybe a 20 or 25 in a game bird feed, and that's costing you well over $20 to $30 per sack. You're getting way better than that for $11 a sack. Even if you didn't cut it back, 30% protein for $11 a sack is a great price for the production and health of your chickens. When I was using store-brand pellets, I was getting like 5 or 6 eggs a day from my 11 hens. When I switched to this method, I'm getting literally 11 eggs a day. I'm getting an egg from every hen every day, and one of these hens is 5 years old and still dropping an egg a day. This is the wheat. It says white wheat. You can use white or red, though red is probably a little healthier. We can also sprout all of these grains for extra nutrition. Here are my oats. They look kind of like skinny wheat. Because of the size of my container, I'm doing half bags. This is our dried corn. Chickens can eat whole corn without cracking it, without any trouble. It's better for them because the minerals and oils are still in there when it's whole. This is the soybean meal. The reason it is ground while everything else is whole is because the soybean is kind of big and hard, making it difficult for them to eat whole. Adding beans and peas can also add protein, but soybean meal is the best price and easiest for them to digest. I'm adding the soy into the mix. This red stuff is the calf manna. I didn't figure this into the 30 to 35% protein computation, but it adds extra calcium and minerals. You don't have to do this. I'm just adding it because I have it. You don't want to mix this in such huge portions that you can't stir it. I kept the ratios. 1 part corn, 1 part wheat, 1 part oats, and 1 3 part soy. But I did half of that so I would have a smaller portion to deal with. Doesn't that look more appetizing to you than those old ground pellets? I think they're going to like this. If this guide on mixing your own poultry feed has changed the way you look at those bags of store-bought pellets, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the traditional methods and self-sufficiency secrets that have been overlooked for too long. Let's cultivate a better future for our flocks. The next treasure trove of homesteading wisdom will be open soon.